Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining me today on the AgentXcel podcast. And today I'm going to be dropping a show where my wife and I, Brittany and I, we were on Fired Up Friday. And that was this Friday. We were on there. It was Dustin Runyon and Chelsea Wright were interviewing my wife and I just about our real estate career and working, being married, and how we set our goals and how we've changed our team structure over the years. So I asked them for a recording of it, and we're going to drop it here on our podcast. So I hope you guys enjoy the show.
Happy Friday, y'all. I am so pumped for this edition of Fired Up Friday. I do say that every week, but I have to tell you that I mean it a little extra this week because Chris Bowers and Brittany Bowers have been a couple of people that I've personally looked up to in this industry for quite some time. I have the privilege of collaborating with Brittany Bowers in the Next Level Ladies group, and I have seen her genius at work. And so I am really excited to share them with you guys. These two are based out of Phoenix. And what really I think sets them apart is like not only do they crush it with production, like they have a strong sales background, but they help transform agents' lives and businesses and get them off the rat race, right? Like so many agents are running around doing all of the things and they're not putting money in their own pockets and they're not building sustainable wealth and they're not building a legacy for their families and they're not buying real estate and learning how to use it as an investment tool. And so Chris and Brittany have not only built an incredible business, but they have shared their blueprint with so many and have transformed so many lives that I know you're going to get a lot of value out of today's conversation. And so, without further ado, Brittany and Chris, if y'all want to start off by just telling us, like, how'd you end up here? Like, I know you've been in the business. It's like 35, 17 years? How many years?
Yeah, so I've been selling real estate for 17, almost 18 years. Yeah, so from 22, it was kind of like first career. It was something that I asked my mom what I should do. I wasn't really, I mean, the traditional school system just wasn't for me. So like going to college just wasn't in the cards. And she said, become a UPS driver or a realtor. And, you look back 17 years later and you're thankful that you picked one over the other. Probably would have been a good life either way. You wouldn't have known what you didn't know, but that's how it started. And so it's went for 17 years and it's just really been just building and really just never getting comfortable with your business and always be willing to reconcile that years change and markets change and your life change and your goal changes. And even though we're in real estate, that doesn't mean we have to do it one way. And just because we did it the same way last year, how we did it, we don't have to do it this year. So 17 years. Brittany, when did you really join like doing real estate when did you do
I
that?
was about
Like 5 years ago?
It was about 5 years ago. Yeah. So I had a corporate job at a brokerage that's based here in Arizona. It's nationwide, but I was on the corporate side and just not really dealing with a lot of time freedom, honestly. And I could just see Chris, and he's just like doing his thing every day. I was like, "You want to go on vacation?" I was like, "Cool. Well, I have 2 weeks, so when are we gonna go, and what are we gonna do?" And it just didn't really allow me a lot of time freedom. So although I loved what I did, it just was time to make a move. And Chris was starting to get really busy at that time. At that time, he was a solo agent, no, not even a TC, doing all of his own paperwork and everything. And he's like, I think if you were to get your license and work, if we could work together, I think we could really like make this something big. And so we kind of made that scary jump, and I jumped in, got my license, and thankfully, like the next year, we doubled our production. So that was really cool, and we had all this freedom for time.
Yeah, and Brittany was always so ever since I've been a realtor for 17 years, we've known each other, right? So we've been dating right when I got my license, we started dating. And so she always knew the realtor life. So she knew me from that just 22-year-old and then started a business and was trying to grow. So she always behind the scenes was doing a little bit, like doing spreadsheets for me, helping me with Meller. She was just being,
The
like
realtors,
spouse. Yeah,
yeah.
she was always being spouse helping realtor, right? And then it wasn't until like 4 or 5 years ago it was really a decision of like, this is how much money you're making at your job. And that role in our company would be worth like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands as far as like paying someone to do that. So why would you go use your talents to build somebody else's company when you could use your talents to build our company? And I was just okay with either answer. I'm down for people not doing stuff just because of money, right? So if it was like, hey, no, I want to stay in my own lane, do this, I was cool with it. But it was just something where I saw an opportunity of what I'm missing in our company is you. Like, so instead of going out and hiring for this and paying somebody, what, $80,000-$90,000 a year to do, why wouldn't you just come in and have ownership of that? Know that you're the owner of the company ultimately, and we could go make a ton more for our family. So that's how that transition happened.
Did you guys, because I know there's a lot of feedback on not working with family or not working with friends. How did you guys set up some preliminary, like, I don't know, boundaries or conversations or like safe words on how that was going to go?
I think for us, it works a little, we're a little unusual because I feel like we both have, before I had my corporate job, I actually owned a franchise too. So I always have had this like business owner mindset. And I think since we both have that, that can typically cause like friction in a business, right? So I think going into it, like we both were pretty clear on like what we were good at and what we were going to kind of make our own lanes. And I think the only thing we had to really work on is just like staying in those lanes and just like mostly Chris. We like have a joke in our office. We're like, get out of our lane. And he's actually like so good at that now. So but I think for us personally, I think one thing that we're also pretty good at too is like recognizing when someone needs help in something or like something feels heavy for that person. I think we just naturally, without a lot of speaking, can like pick up the pieces. And so I don't know if that's like helpful to anybody, but I feel like we can read each other's personality pretty well. And so it's like, hey, like they're struggling here. Like, what can I do to help make that part of their job easier? Or where can we create leverage in our business that will kind of like make that person's job a little bit more fruitful and then also enjoyable?
Yeah, I went to breakfast with Kevin and Fred probably like a month ago, and they'd asked me that question, like, well, when did you guys decide like who really did what?
Yeah.
And I said, we really didn't do like, we don't really, when we go on missions, I call them missions. There's always like a project that year that I want to do. And it's usually what we want to do with the profits of our real estate, right? So it's like my mission. I call it like my side hustle is really like taking profits and doing stuff with it. And so we just, we have this understanding where we don't actually sit formally and talk about it. We just know like collectively what the mission is for our lives and like where we want to go. And we realize like we both have different talents. Like I am more of a hunter. Like I like to go out every day and hunt. Brittany is more a preparer. And so like I'm gonna go and use my like hunting ability. Like that's what I think of. Like if this was like forever ago, I would have went out every day and be like, I'm gonna go hunt something. And she'd be like, okay, you go do that. I would have brought it back and been like, I don't even know what to do with this thing, right? And she would have, cooked it and prepared it, and we'd had a really cool party, and I'd have showed up to the party and people would have been like, oh man, Chris has really cool parties. I'm like, no, I really don't have cool parties. I don't even know how this thing happened. I'm just here in my own house, and this was all put together, but I just went and hunted. So like we realized that we have just different styles, and we respect that, and we don't try to change each other's styles. And so yeah, there's not a lot of sitting down and talking about like who does what. It's just, this is the mission, this is what's got to get done that day, and we just naturally gravitate towards what feels the most comfortable. And at the end of the day in production, it's client needs to be happy, right? If you just keep that in mind, like our end goal is client be happy. Every day we have a lot of clients. Every day we need happy clients in each stage. And we just decide like, okay, we have this many clients. Who does, you do that, I do this, and we go. And
Yeah.
so it's not really a formal process. It's more of just a trust of knowing each other for 17, 18 years. Also a lot of, we're both very forgiving. That's probably just our relationship that we have with God. So we both understand that we're flawed people here on this earth, right? So like every day I wake up and make mistakes, and it's so cool to have a spouse that doesn't sit there all day and be like, oh, well, I'm keeping score here, right? Just like we move on, we learn from it, and we go. And I think what Britt said was like staying in your lane was hard for me because I had this company for like 15 years with nobody in it. And then when she got getting involved, it was actually getting better. But then I was the master of getting in people's lanes. I would just scoot my car right in your lane, no blinker. I would just straight like, nope, coming in your lane, no blinker. And they'd be like, whoa, like, what are you doing here? Like to the point where they asked me to like not come to our like office, like our team meeting on Zoom in the morning because I would come in on level like 5. I wake up really early. I'm coming into these meetings revved up on like level 4, ready to go hunt. And they're just like coming in with coffee, just starting their days and like, whoa, chill. And I'm like, no, I got no time to chill right now. So we just realized like, hey, Chris, like they were like, hey, like, let's not have you in these anymore. Like it's not actually beneficial to what we're trying to accomplish. And to hear people tell you on something that you felt like you built, tell you that they don't need you for that, it's actually like, okay, cool. Like this is what was supposed to happen. And pride or ego makes you want to stay involved in that. And then when you just let it all go and be like, wow, actually a lot of people are better at this stuff than you actually are, and you just accept it, you're like, cool, that's fair. Like that's how a company would get built. You guys go run that, I'll go run this, and we'll just all trust each other. And that's, I feel like, a good process for us.
Yeah, I think that where a lot of people struggle, especially when they're getting to a point of developing a team, is understanding the difference between leadership and management. And I think what you just beautifully described is that Britt is a really strong manager, and she knows how to drive your vision or like your collective vision forward. And you're a really great visionary and leader. And so when you dump a leader into the weeds, they make a mess. Like that's not where they belong. And so that's really great. And I think the other thing that you said is that you feel that you naturally found a fit, right? But if you go back 5 years ago to when you were considering hiring Britt, you had a really detailed view of her talents, a detailed view of her abilities, a detailed view of what role you needed to have filled within the company. And it just so happened that your spouse was the best person for that role. But I do think that a lot of people go into hiring without understanding what they need, without understanding their own weaknesses, without understanding the gaps, and without qualifying the person to fill that position, right? And so I do think that like it happened organically, but also, no, you're a little bit of a planner, Chris. Like you're very detail oriented.
Yeah, and I mean, it's like when people call me and they're like, should I hire someone that they know to work for them? I'm like, hey, here's the deal. That's not off the limits. It's just don't hire them because it's the easiest fit. So it's like when somebody wants to rent one of our properties and they'll be like, hey, do you rent to family? And I'm like, as long as they go through the same process and they're the most qualified person. So it's not like I won't rent to family. It's just you go through the same process of the other people. And if that's the right fit, then good. But like you don't get that just because you're that. And I'm not going to say I won't rent to that person because of that. So it's just you've got to go through the same funnel. When we start making decisions just based off default, that's when it's like, whoa, like really, like if we went out there with this much money and said like, hey, what's the talent pool out there with this much money? What could we get? Would it be your spouse? Would it be your sister? Would it be your cousin? And if you were saying, hey, I'm taking this money and I'm going to go interview people, would that be the best person? If your answer is no, then you're just actually hiring that person out of convenience, default, or laziness. You get to decide. There's no judgment in that statement, but that's what the three are. And so if you just opened up a job ad and actually got other applicants, you might have to turn into a better leader to hire a better person.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of how I looked at that when we made that decision, because I definitely didn't want to do it by default. I saw people naturally do that way too much in real estate. And then it was either like divorce or a really bad company. And I wasn't willing to have either. And I wasn't going to compromise either one of them for my goals. I thought, wow, we could have a stellar relationship and a really cool business. And so that's how I think that process was managed.
Yeah. Britt, how do you guys manage like the romantic side and the business side? Because the thing that I know about both of you is like, girl, you don't turn it off. Like you carve out space for yourself and very much are about, self-help and, having a balanced life and all the things, but you're so ambitious and you hold the team accountable to not creating stories about their leads and to drive the mission forward. And like, you are such a powerhouse. Like, how do you make sure it doesn't bleed? Or do you let it
Yeah,
go?
well, I think one thing we both had to work on, like intentionally, was shutting off business talk during certain times. So if you follow us on Instagram, you probably see that we do date night every week. And well, lately we've been doing a challenge, so like it's just been getting through the challenge. So, but we do date night every week. So that's kind of like a priority for us to separate a small amount of time every week where we can just connect. And we like really, really harp on the idea of not talking about work during that time because we talk about it all the time, right? I mean, it is like our livelihood. We work together. So we really try hard during that portion not to talk about that. And then we also are trying hard to like focus on other things outside of work too. So lately we've been focusing on our health together. Both been kind of on this health journey. So it's been nice to kind of put attention on different things. But to tell you the truth, like it is very difficult to shut that part off, especially when it kind of consumes you at a pretty high level. So I think you just have to be really aware of that. Like, know that's who you are. Like, we both genuinely love talking about our business. We love growing. We love talking about investing. Like, we enjoy all of those things, but we just want to make sure that we're enjoying each other as well. And so, what's kind of nice is that even though we do work together and we do often see each other throughout the day, we also have such different roles in our company that we actually feel like we can come back at night and actually tell each other about our day and genuinely have things to say that they don't know because we're both totally working on different things. So even if we do have to talk about work, I still feel like it makes it interesting. But we do carve out time though to separate ourselves from that, and we make it a point not to talk about that.
And it's been something that, that's probably more of a me, that's probably more of a thing that I had to figure out the most because I can talk business like 24/7.
Same.
And so Brittany, like, even though she probably could, I don't know if she always wants to as a hobby. I like legitimately could just go like talk to anybody about business at all times of the day. So I recognize that. And it was probably about a year ago, I started making notes on my phone. And I don't like, it's not 100% working, but it's pretty close. And it's always, I'm striving to be perfect on it, even though I'm not. And it's after about 6 p.m., I just try not to like naturally talk business anymore. I try to talk about other things. I try to, right? Just like something will come up in my brain. I'll be like, nope, like maybe this is just a tomorrow conversation at 11 when we're in business mode. In the morning times anymore, like I used to wake up, like Brittany sleeps in a few hours later than me. I used to come into the room, sit on like we have like these chairs in our room. We were supposed to read a book. No books have ever been read there. And I'd sit there and she's like waking her eyes up and I'm like, okay, here we go. Like this just happened. And like I would straight blitz her when she would open her eyes with all that's been on in 3 hours since I've been up. It just sounds natural, right? Like I would go out and hunt and I would already been up since 4:30. And so she had told me one time we were talking, she's like, maybe like I could just like get up, do my thing, get a coffee, read my Bible, and then participate in that. So it was like after 6, 7 now, and now it's very early mornings. I just lay low of just like no conversations about that. And like, for example, 8 o'clock today, we sat down and watched Dateline from 8 to 9. We watched Dateline this morning. So as much as people think I'm super structured, that is also still super structured, like that was just naturally time that I felt like, hey, she was sitting there. I was allowed to, thank God we have people that help us run our company. And I was like, that was a moment where I was like, hey, let's just sit there together, watch Dateline. We had our dog right there with us. And that was a really cool hour that's what we did this morning. And so that's something that over time, I've probably allowed to happen more is that, hey, like work actually isn't always that important. And it's fair to say, like, it's just not. Like we have lives. And even though we want to have a good business, we don't need to talk about clients, transactions all the time. So we've just kind of just figured out how to have somewhat of a day where you talk about other things. And then also, I think it's important to note that if you like your life and your business, also be okay with talking about that at dinner. I'm like, what else do people talk about? Like, like what happened in this reality show or that, or what vacations they want. Like, don't get me wrong. Like if you love your job and your business and you like building, I'm not saying like the appraisal and the inspection, like those aren't really that fun. But like when you genuinely say like, we have a business that we profit off of and we get to go really, really cool things with our money. We get to go buy assets. We get to go take vacations. When you're that excited about your business, don't let other people's rules come into your life. Like, oh, you shouldn't be talking about business at dinner. And I'm like, Well, if that's what we want to talk about because we love our business and we like what it does for our lives, then we will talk about it. So it's kind of this counterbalance of don't feel like you have to be all in or all out, and just set up just standards for you. Like what's your, every relationship's different. And so if just be self-aware. And here's what I would also say is ask questions. I wonder sometimes, why do we have such good relationships, or why do some people have such good relationships with their employees, but like not their spouse? And it's like, are you sitting down on a weekly basis, just like you would with your buyer's agent, be like, hey, like, is there anything that I could do like that would make your life easier? You know, is there something that I could do? Like, am I doing something daily that just like stresses you out? And when you ask that question to somebody, like get ready for the answer and just be okay with it. Like if you just ask everybody in life, hey, is there something that I can do to make your life easier? Or is there something I could stop doing to make your life easier? Get ready for what they say. And then don't diss them when they tell you the truth, and sit down in thought or prayer and decide, like, could I do that differently? And you realize like we're just running on autopilot our lives. We never ask people how they want us to treat them. And everybody wants to be treated differently. If you just ask them, it's pretty simple. They'll say like the darndest of things of what makes them happy. And you're like, really? That makes you happy? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, duly noted. I think I can put that down on a little notepad and figure out how to make your life simpler. Very cool. So it's that stuff.
Yeah, man. It's funny that you mentioned that, because I was going to say, what I hear from you guys is you use boundaries, but not in the way that people expect to use boundaries. I think a lot of people expect boundaries to be limits that are put on others, but you have taken such personal accountability of your boundaries that you're like, hey, I don't always get the best response when I blitz Britt at like 8 o'clock in the morning wanting to talk about work. So maybe I just don't do that. Right. Or like, hey, I realize that talking about the business all the time, especially after 6 p.m., is creating tension in the relationship or is getting a little exhausting. Like maybe I create a rule for me that that's not a thing I'm going to do anymore because I value X, Y, or Z. But then I love that you also go the extra mile of asking somebody like what would benefit them or how to make it easier, because the reality is that in the United States, very few people grew up in households where their needs were able to be communicated and ensured. Right. And so like it takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of therapy. It takes a lot of being with the right person to be able to communicate your needs and then to then see them fulfilled. Like that in and of itself is not the norm. And so because you guys do that with each other and because you do it with your employees, you set an example of like, hey, we genuinely care and we will execute on what you shared with us. And I think that that's really how you build trust. So that way down the road, when work or life or whatever gets chaotic, right? Y'all have in those little moments taught each other that you can trust each other. Yeah.
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 That's fair.
I think one other thing I want to add too is like we also like highly encourage each other to like rest. Like so like there'll be some times where like we go for like a long period of time or we have several days and it's just like if you went to go take a nap, like I would never be like, oh my gosh, we can't believe you're napping right now. Like we have so much stuff to do. Like we really like, encourage each other like to go do that stuff because like we do know like we're on a lot of times right throughout the day. And sometimes we go on little sprints where it's like, we have a mission or whatever. And so I think we really highly encourage each other to keep rest and we never like keep score of like who's working harder in the business because I feel like we both like mutually respect that like we put in the same amount of effort.
Yeah. Well, and you demonstrate it by, communicating that effort, but also supporting each other and asking like how you can better support each other. And I love that. I was fire, dude. So many leaders have great relationships with their employees, but not with their spouses. And it boils down to questions. Like everybody should have written that down. Let's shift gears a little bit. Y'all had a team and were really successful and it wasn't the most profitable. And one day you decided to do something radically different. Explain what you're doing now and how you reached that decision.
Yeah, so it started from like probably the framework. I always like to not like what was the decision, but how I came up with the answer to that decision, I think is usually more important how people can learn. But I remember probably like 9 years ago, a guy named Russell Shaw in our market, huge on the radio. And I went to some of his training and he said, hopefully I say this right, but he said, I want the least amount of people on my team to deliver the highest level of customer service for the amount of work that's coming in that year.
Mm.
And that just, and I was doing very little transaction when this guy said this, but it stuck to me. And I'm like, I would go to all these events and people would like brag about how many, like it was almost how many buyer's agents do you have?
Mm.
Okay. Like, do you want to start off with like, what's my name? Like, hello. Like, it's just like, how many buyer's agents do you have? How many assistants do you have? And I'm like, how much profit do you have? Right? Like, is that fair to ask or no? So if you're going to ask me this stuff, can I ask more detailed questions? Because I don't like surface talk. I want actually detail. So if we're going to start engaging, let's go deep. And if we're
Right.
not going to go deep, let's not start. So like they would ask this stuff and I'm like, what are we doing here? And so I heard Russell Shaw say that I want the least amount of people to deliver the highest amount of customer service for the amount of work I have that year. So in that equation, all I could hear was, wait, are years different? And I had seen my parents run an uber successful company for 20 something years and realized there was markets where they made a lot of money. And there's other years where they just made good money. There was
Mhm.
never very many years where they made no money. It was just like really uber, like ton of money. And then it was like, just good money. And so knowing that, like we only started, like I had no goal of having a team. Like I never woke up one day, I was like, oh my gosh, I want a team. I actually think that people can get in trouble when that is the goal. If
Mhm.
it's I need people around me to deliver the highest customer service for the amount of work I have, well, then how much work do you have? So we got a Zillow Flex account in Arizona a few years ago. Just got it, right? And me, I was just like, hey, I'm going to hustle this thing. Like I got this account, didn't even really naturally want it. I'm just like, I wanted to do it because I could see I could build on it. And so I started doing this Flex account, Zillow Flex account. And as I was doing it, I didn't even like doing it. I liked the fact that I knew if I did it long enough, I would know the pain points and I could hire someone and then they couldn't fool me because I did it.
Yeah.
And so I could tell them, hey, I did that, right? And so we just started hiring on that account and went from 1 agent to 3 agents to 7 agents to 14 agents. And was there anything great that we did in that process? I don't know. It was just we knew how to go get an account and we got it. And it got that big. And that's as big as it got. And then after that account went away, it was totally fine because that's not who I was. I wasn't the guy who found my identity at the events. Like, ooh, I've got 14 buyers agents. Like, I don't even like know like why we need that, right? And so coming into that and that not being my identity as a team, like that's not how I felt like I earned profits. And then when that account went away, it wasn't something that I wore like a badge of honor of how many team members I have. And then we just switched. And that switch was just super simple because it was just who I was 3 years ago. And I never disconnected from my principles. And if you don't connect from your principles, then it's like I have nothing to be embarrassed about, right? Like I'm just running a business like everybody else. And then you look up and you're like, oh, well, Home Depot and Lowe's and all these other companies have to go into boardrooms and be like, hey, like, are we down a little bit? And if they are, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that year. So that's kind of how our team started and then how it kind of dissolved from many agents to not as many agents. Britt, what's your side of the story of that? I'm sure I only see one side of it.
Yeah, no, I actually do agree with everything that you just said. And I think that what some people miss when they like are wanting to start a team or like hear the word team, like they think it's like, I think they think it's a lot easier than it is. Like managing people at that level when they're dependent on you for leads is incredibly stressful. Like the amount of attention that is needed to like not only like maintain that account to make sure like you're performing at a high level, but then also maintain everyone else's levels and like the accountability and the weekly meetings and like making sure that there's infrastructure in your team so that we can all produce at this level and keep producing. I mean, it's a lot that people don't really take into consideration. I'm not trying to talk anybody out of having a team, but like for us, that's why like when this account like went away, we were almost like, oh, kind of like thank God. Like this was like it was causing us to scale at a level that was like not bringing in the profit at the same level, and then also causing us to get just so much bigger and so much heavier infrastructure wise that like we were more than comfortable with. And when we had been operating at a really high profitability rate before then, it was just kind of like, gosh, I'm like ready for this to be done. So we do still have two team members, and I adore them, and like they're exactly like the type of personality that like fits with our team. Like, so I'm really happy with like what we have now, and I actually like still like I'm in contact with a lot of people that were on our team. I'm super happy for them. A lot of them are still in real estate, so it's just, you know, but I think it actually worked out for everybody too, because I think even as a team member, if you're dependent on a specific lead source, that lead source goes away, that can be incredibly stressful for them as well. So I think actually like for the team leadership and also like the team member, I think it's helpful when you kind of create a balance that's not dependent on one particular item. So
and that's what's really
and
cool about having, you know, Brittany involved is it was probably Britt, like I'll always say we bowed out of the Zillow Flex account, which we didn't. I did, meaning I was the one getting on these meetings with them every single week. And there was a day where I just looked up and I was like, I'm done. Like, they can let me go. I'm done. So like when I say we bowed out of the Zillow Flex account, we like on paper didn't, but like I did. So I had told her, I walked into her office one day. I'm like, if you want to show up that meeting next week, all yours, but I'm done. And it was so freeing. I am always one that like I'll bounce out when things are good because I know there's great. And when other people look at you and you're like, that's great. I'm like, but it's only my good. Just because it's your great doesn't mean it's great for me. It's just my good now. Like it was my great and now it's my good. And there's another great. And I'm willing to reconcile that at all times. So like we got that account and it was so good. Like we went on a run with that account. We bought like 16 more rental properties during that account. We made money. Like no one was crying for us. It was just we woke up and said like that served its purpose. Like I think people think they've got to have the whole infrastructure for the whole life. And I'm like, no, like that served us for that season. We did what we needed to do. We cashed out of that. We bought stuff with it. It served us. And now, does that have to be my 39 to 42-year-old self? He wants to be a different version. And I think because he did that, he's allowed to do that. Right. And I'm just talking to myself.
Yeah.
So like I had looked at that and I was like, I need to bow out of this. Like I sit in flow state. It's how I look at my life. And if something's not giving me flow state, I'm gone. Like I don't care how much money you're paying me. If it's not giving me energy, it'll take away from the next thing in my life that's super important. And if it doesn't give me energy, it leads to the next thing. And if the next thing's important to me, like date night, if I don't go into that with good energy, I'm not a good person. So I looked at that Zillow account and I was just like, done with it. And so I was like, Britt, if you want, take over on that, keep it alive if you want. If it goes away, I'm good. And that's kind of how I mentally checked out of it. I went and started building other things. And then we had that for a little while, but it's also really nice to know when you're the one that bowed out of something, why it was good. And then when it goes away, it's like, it's not a go away and think about it for 3 months. I'm like, oh, like I knew it was going away the whole time while I was building something different. That was freeing.
Mm-hmm. I think, you know, good can be the enemy of great in a lot of situations. And too often in this industry, we allow people from stage to define what our good is or to define what our great is. And something that I really love about what you guys do is that you actively talk about investing in real estate. You actively talk about building a more profitable business. You actively talk about like what truly matters. Like a lot of people are running businesses that are really just being self-employed, right? And they're not making enough money to reinvest into their futures. They're not making enough money to reinvest into their families. And so how did you get on that path? Like at what point were you like, I'm going to start investing in real estate and we're going to have a portfolio? How many homes do you currently have?
We have 20. We have 20 right now, but it'll probably go to 30 by the end of next year with just some new stuff that I'm learning. But that was just, you know, Chelsea, I would go to masterminds and I would hear people talking about, they would say, I put all my profit back into their company.
Yeah, dude.
And I'm just like, there's no judgment in this. If that's their goal, I'm like, I would want to ask that person, like, what's your goal? And if their goal is, I want to have a company forever that's going to spit me off money when I'm 97 to retire, if that's their goal, then great. But when somebody says something, I'm always looking at like, what's your goal? And so when they would say that, like, oh, I invest all my profits back into my company, I'm like, what's my goal? And my goal is to like say peace one day, right? And so I was just very clear that like this industry, it's here, but it doesn't have to be who you are forever. So like if there's a day at 46 that I wake up and I'm like, I'm good, right? And so those people that are always investing back into a business, that would mean that there would have to one day be a business.
Right.
Well, then next, it's also, we would, in that same mastermind, they would talk about, well, what if Zillow takes over? And I'm like, wait, how in this mastermind did invest all your profits back into the business come into the equation? And then the same person would say, what if Zillow takes over? And I'm like, are we not like looking up one day and thinking that this industry could change? So when somebody recently asked me, like, what's going to happen, Chris, if something changes in the industry where we don't get a buyer broker? And I'm like, oh, I thought about that 4 years ago. You
Mm.
know, like sometimes you can just ride off on the horse and say peace, right? Now, I'm not saying we're there, we want to be there. It's just, it's not invest all money back into the business to have a really cool business to people. It's like, what is the goal of the business? And the goal of the business is to make profits. And if we go down the road, it makes sense. If the goal of the business is to make profits, well, how does one make profits? Well, we get them by referrals. How do you get referrals? Make clients happy. So clients being happy and that profits comes in the equation. It's just like, we want to make a lot of profits. We've got to give good customer service to get referrals. And then so when we get the profits, we want to invest it out of the business. Now we leave money in to still get an ROI on it, but we look at like our investment strategy in our company the same way as we do any other thing. What's the ROI? And so it's like, hey, let's spend this much money on pay-per-click internet leads per month and get this ROI. It's like a true investment in my head of what's that getting us ROI. But I feel like we got to take some of that out for our goals to be able to one day say we're done. Otherwise, I don't know, like, I have not met, and maybe this is just me, but like, I haven't met a lot of 92-year-olds that like I see and they're like, oh, I have this business. It's a real estate business that I once actively was the face of. And it now just spits me off $1 million a year. And I never, like, I just check in 20 minutes. So I'm like, really, like, what are we building? Like people think they're going to like have this business that's going to run and make them a lot of money when they're 87. I'm like, I don't know. If you're the face of that business, I mean, good luck. Maybe they're better business owners than me, but I just couldn't envision something still running on its own with the profit margins that real estate has. Cause I feel like I'd have to give somebody probably like $250,000 a year, at least maybe 300,000 to care about that business like I care about it. And so kind of how I look at it. Britt, what was your
I think Yeah, I think for us too is about like, so we don't know much about like stocks or any other thing like that. And for us, it's like, okay, like we're self-employed, like we feel like it's necessary to have multiple streams of income. So what does that look like for us? What do we know? And for us, it was real estate. Like we know real estate, right? Like we can run rental comps, we can, figure out the math to buy this house and see what it can do long term for us. So for us, it is almost like a retirement strategy to purchase these assets and kind of grow our portfolio that way, because it was honestly what we knew and what we were comfortable with. Like I'm sure there's a lot of people that like feel really comfortable with stocks or like understand that at a high level. Like we didn't. Like we don't really understand, like, I mean, we're trying to learn, but like we don't really understand like IRAs and like, just like all those things, like 401ks and things like that. So it's like this was what we knew and understood, and it made the most sense to us to invest in because we do it for a living. So that's kind of what spurred us to start that. And we actually started it organically with our very first property that we bought. It became our very first rental as we moved up. And that's kind of where we started our journey. And so.
Nice. Yeah. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to not having an exit strategy or feeling like the industry paints a picture of how your business should look, and the picture does not include an exit strategy. And that's something that I really love about you guys, is that you are a few steps ahead, the two of you, frequently.
When you almost have to be. Like, I don't know how many clients that I sit down at their house, and as I say this, please note, like, I have a very good heart, so this is going to come out the wrong way. This is just how I talk to myself. But like when I sit down with somebody who's 78 years old and like they're in this position where I'm selling their house because they're struggling, there's no judgment in this. I just see a future Chris that's almost 40 that's going to be 80, and I'm like, did we not think that, like, do we not understand the natural progression of life is that we get old, and as we get older we run out of energy or something happens health wise? Like the same energy I have today I might not have in 9 years, whether it's by like voluntarily bowing out and saying I'm done, or being like forced out because someone's like, hey, you're not doing well, right? And so like, it's just, there's these variables that are going to come over the next 10 and 15 years. And I don't control a lot of them. I just control some of them. So like what I can control is like what I'm doing today with the energy I have. And I'm trying to use it in the best way that like that 78-year-old will look back on that younger person. So like, hey, I'm proud. Like you gave a little bit more effort when we had, like, I'm talking to myself, like, you gave a little bit more effort when you didn't have to, but you could see like the 78-year-old that woke up maybe with like a hurt knee or something. And you're just like, thank you for like using that energy for good to take care of me and your wife. And that's what I think we've got to look at is like that day is coming. To not think about it is really interesting because it's coming. So like how you approach that is just going to be like, did you try to actually meet that future person? And are they proud of what you did to get them there? And I'm not saying there's a lot of variables, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like all we ever, like I always will say, like, I don't feel like people care that they lost. I feel that they care that they didn't play the game. And so I just look up and I'm like, when I'm 80, I just want to be able to look back and be like, hey, like maybe I took an L, but like I played the game. Like I did it to the best of my knowledge and every single day that I could. I gave it as much as I could. Like I eliminated a little bit of Netflix and chill, and I eliminated a little bit. I took some sports out of my life that I watched so that we could actually go accomplish something. But yeah, I just think that we don't think about that enough. I know that that's not a fun conversation to have with yourself. But I think that as I meet with more and more older people at their homes and we talk about them selling their house, or I'm like, hey, why is your AC like not on? Like, oh, I can't afford it. I'm just like, oh man, like my heart hurts for them. So I'm like, they're trying to save like $120 and 115 heat because they don't have enough funds because they're like, oh, I just thought I was going to live off Social Security. And I'm like, you really thought those peanuts were going to pay your bills with inflation? Like, just like what land were we living in? And so that's how I talk to myself. Is I want to make sure when I get to that older self that I wasn't living in a fantasy land of what things would cost at that age.
Yeah. Britt, how do you stay in a long-term focus? Like how do you keep up with Chris's 20-year vision?
I think one thing that, we try to do with our is we really try to have a lot of financial conversations. And I think that that's probably uncomfortable for some. And I know it's uncomfortable for even for us for a long time, but I think like the more you have like that, like, what are we going to do with this money? And thankfully, like most of us made like pretty good money the last couple of years. It was kind of like, what are we going to do with it? And so for us, it made sense, like I said, to go to real estate. But I also think like at that time too, like it was hard not to, but like we actually didn't really like level up our life very much either, which I think like that was like a challenge, I think, at a time when maybe we could have more than ever. But we really tried to focus on that. Like, hey, like let's just live simply, just like kind of how we are, right? Maybe we took a little bit more vacations than normal, but like, we didn't go out and buy like new, and again, no judgment again, but like we didn't go out and buy like new cars or like a bigger house or like move, you know what I mean? It was just kind of like, hey, let's just say where we're at and like let's just reinvest this money. So I think as far as like long-term vision, we just both have a goal that we want to be really comfortable when we're older. And I've seen in my own family, like some family members that are, of older age and they're not as comfortable, or like they wish they would have done this differently or not sold this property. So we kind of like take that to heart. We're like, hey, like those are there to be lessons for us. Like, let's try to focus on that. And I think that we're always not only trying to grow, but like we realize too, like maybe our interests will change in 10 years and we don't want to be doing real estate anymore. I still feel like we will because we love it. But I think it's just like setting yourself up so that you have multiple streams of income and not just one, so that, when times are lean, you don't feel as stressed. And then also, if you want to go and venture out and invest some more in a different business, like you have the opportunity to. So I think it's just about like providing future opportunities, even if we don't know what those opportunities look like today.
And
Yeah.
not having sorry, Chelsea, not having the team actually, like there was pieces of the team that I loved, right? So like it was God's plan, and I'm thankful for this because he has a plan for all of us, right? Like we just got to lean into it when he gives us the plan, right? We still got to use our hands and do some work. And the part of the team that I love was the finding people that needed help and helping them build and grow and giving them playbooks. Like that was the part of the team that I really loved. It was like, I see something in you that I don't know if someone else sees in you. And I want to bring that out. And I want to like tell you, like, I want you to place a bet on yourself. And I bet that that's going to win. And so I love that part of it. It was the more of like bringing someone up and telling them what they could be and coaching them and giving them playbooks. And they still had to bring the hard work to the party, but I could bring the lane and the vision. And that was fun. And so that's where like EXP was introduced to me right at the right stage, right? Now, some could say like, oh, well, was that luck? And I'm like, no, that was just God's plan. Like that's just when you're in drive mode every day, like a lot of opportunity gets put in front of you. And what that EXP model did for us was when I bowed out of that Zillow account, like that era of me just like, is this team really everything I want it to be, right? On the profit and loss. But then I'm still getting like joy from, so from a team aspect, there's like 6 things you got to do. And there was like 2 that were giving me joy and 5 things that were not giving me joy. And with the EXP model on recruiting, I got to keep 2 of the joys and I don't have to deal with like 5 of the things I didn't like. So like that model blended well for someone like me who doesn't need to have my name in lights to feel comfortable. And so I was like, hey, if I could just have all these agents in Arizona or across the country shining, like if they just all have their signs out there and they're winning at high levels, and I was just a part of introducing them to something and I get incentivized for that. So now I look at it when someone's like, hey, you don't have a team anymore. And I'm like, I actually have the coolest team ever. And they're like, why? And I'm like, because when I taught a class 3 months ago and there was like 15 people out of the 70 something in my EXP organization, there was like 15 people there. And I looked at that and I was like, that's my team. It's just different in my brain. It's like, they're not all putting the Bowers team signs out. And I don't make direct commissions off every one of their deals. That's my squad. Like I look at it like I'm a business consultant. I'm a coach to these business owners. So it's actually like next level team. It's like I'm helping you build a team. And that is my team. I don't need the agents that need leads to close deals. I want to find business owners that see something that we built and want a playbook. And we haven't built anything. I'm not saying what we build is great, but I'm not saying it's just like it's not, we're not at the end, right?
Right.
And people can say like, hey, that's not that cool. And that's fine. But I'm like, hey, this is just what we did. And I think that if everybody just grabbed someone's hand every day and got pulled up, and if you just grabbed your hand down and pulled someone up, the world would be a lot cooler when you're just like, I look at the day and say, how can I be a student today? How can I be a teacher today? And how can I be a leader today? And I think a leader is just somebody who teaches a lot more people than others.
Yeah.
So it's like, I want to be a student. I've got people right now that I'm learning from with health and how to lift weights and stuff. I'm a student every day. Be a teacher, teach somebody something, be a leader, lead someone, and be those 3 every day. And it's like a full circle every day of realizing like you ain't that cool. And then you're also cool. And if you can put yourself in those 3 stages every 24 hours, that's a cool life. And you're like, hey, I'm very insecure in this. Can you please help me? And then someone else like, hey, I'm like, can you help me? And I'm like, yes. And that's how I feel like that whole team model and the EXP model blended together. And it's still, you can say like, yeah, we do have a team. We just have a much cooler one than most people. And I can say that like super proudly.
Well, and you have less stress. I love what you said because Dustin actually shares the same belief of setting up your social circle to be in thirds, right? Hang out with a third of the people who are, slightly figuring it out. They're not on your playing field, but you could help lift them up. A third of the people are in the dirt with you. They're going through the same grind, the same hustle. They're learning the same lessons. Y'all can share notes, right? And then a third of the people who are significantly further along, right? Not ideally not too far along where there's no relevancy, but like far enough along where they can pull you up. That method, it does a wonder to your influence and like how you learn and where you go in life. What I loved too, oh no, I lost my thought. Here's the thing about you two. Earlier you were talking about how you watch Dateline in the morning and how people think that you're just like so structured, but here you are, Chris Bowers, getting loose, watching Dateline at 8 a.m., right? Like the reality is that y'all understand that discipline creates freedom. And you understand it not just with time management. You understand it not just with your financial future. You understand it not just with business, but because you apply so much discipline and apply so much consistency, you give yourself so many choices and you give yourself so much freedom. And it's a really beautiful thing to see because a lot of people assume that it comes first, that freedom comes before discipline. It's like, well, I deserve to do whatever I want to do. And you're like, yes, absolutely. Give yourself that chance, right? Mm-hmm. If you put in the effort today, you do the things today, if you do your best today, financially, physically, relationship wise, like you will have choices. But if you don't, you lose all of them, right? And then life just happens.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I really love about you guys is that you've figured out how to create a lot of freedom through your discipline. Yeah.
We try hard.
Thank you.
Yeah, man. What haven't I asked that I really should have today?
You know where we're going,
Yeah, tell me
and
about
that's a fun one. I think you're allowed to say out loud sometimes that like a market has thrown you a curveball.
that.
And that's so exciting. It's so exciting. I look at those markets when things change, and really it's just a curveball, right? Like everyone's going to say like, oh, the interest rate. And I'm like, no, that's just the curveball, meaning it was a curveball 6 months ago and it was a curveball a year ago. It's just a curveball. It's not the actual thing happening.
Mm-hmm.
It's just something's coming into your day that makes it a little bit interesting. It's interesting how when new markets come for like 2 months, we're sitting back and we're just like, what is this, right? Like, what do we do here? And then all of a sudden, 6 months later, it's normal. And it makes you realize the difference between like uncomfortable and normal is just like 5 months. So now it's like, you just got to figure out how to how do you find peace in the unknown? And that's really, truly like, how do you, like almost every market we've been through, I'm sure everybody on here can say like, the last time we got thrown a curveball, it was for like 2 weeks. We're like, I can feel it. It's different. And then for 2 months, you've got to explain this to clients. And they're like, oh my gosh, like what's going on? And you're uncomfortable. They're uncomfortable. And then in 6 months, everyone's acting like this is normal because now it's discussed at every dinner table. The news is talking about it. So now it's normal. So now it's more comfortable for you to come to the party and talk about it. And so I look at those and say, well, in between the curveball coming at us and feeling comfortable and hitting a curveball, there's a lot of uncomfort. So now I'm like looking at like the framework of what gives us peace when we're in a changing market. And how do we keep that peace on a day-to-day basis when we can say like there's unknown, like hard to go to bed some nights when you're like, tomorrow's unknown. So what I am finding out, especially by doing the 75 hard challenge, is like how many things are actually in our control. And if you just focus daily on the things that you control, you're usually pretty happy. Like I said, no one's usually mad that they lost. They're mad that they didn't play the game. And so I wrote down a list on my phone of all the things that I can control in the day. And then I looked at that and said, am I winning at the things I can control? Or are we always talking about the boogeyman? And some people are always talking about the boogeyman taking over their life. And I'm like, but wait, like these 6 things we do control and we're not controlling them. So like, here we go. Like, let's reconcile this thought. And I'm talking to myself. So when I wrote down the 6 things that I can control every day, I'm like, am I controlling those? Because I don't like things that are unknown and I can't control. So if I don't like the things that I cannot control, and I don't like that feeling, then why am I not controlling the things that I do control? And then finding out how to actually capture that, being like, I can control my health, what I eat, not drinking alcohol, working out, spending time with my wife, calling my family. Like, this is the time in life where it's like, input output. Like I can actually, as long as I'm putting out the work, like I can say I played the game today. So it's really going through that right now and figuring out like, I feel like we're in that curveball moment and there's 3 more months where a lot of us are going to be uncomfortable. And I think what we've got to do is talk to some people around us very vulnerably and figure out how to find your peace throughout that. Because if you can't find that peace throughout that, you're just a wreck. And the world doesn't need a bunch of wrecks. And if you are not a wreck, then try to help the people that are feeling a little wreck. Like we can be the lighthouse. Some people who have figured this out that, have the finances to go through markets that might be coming, or they feel like they're a little bit more secure, not saying they haven't figured out, like be that lighthouse. So if you're the one who is in an issue right now, call somebody who you feel is the lighthouse. And if you're the lighthouse, let those people call you through those times. Like this is our time to shine as human beings. This isn't all about profits. This isn't all about business. This is collectively like, we're all here today because we have a common ground. We all sell real estate, but we're like on this earth to do a lot of other things besides real estate. It's just no one would have came here today if we weren't talking somewhat about real estate. And I think the conversations sometimes need to be had around things that aren't that. If you get those things figured out, it makes real estate actually much easier.
Yeah. Britt, how do you handle?
I think I would add.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think I would add to that. And like a shifting market is what I find is like myself included. I'm talking to me, but like you find that you lose momentum. Like something comes your way, like a piece of information, and you're like, oh my gosh, I feel like I have to analyze this and figure this out. And it's like you lose your momentum and you lose your consistency. And I think like during a shifting market is like where you have to, like Chris said, like you have to make the things within your control still within your control. And you have to still stay consistent with what you were doing previously and probably even amp that up. But I think a lot of people's initial reaction is like recluse mode. Like, I'm going to like hide out or I'm going to try to figure this out on my own. And it's like, everyone's dealing with this right now. So like don't lose your momentum. Don't lose your consistency. Don't do the things every day that you know you should be doing because it's unknown. Like those are the things that are actually going to keep you moving, keep you propelling your business forward. And so I think that would just be like my only other thing that we try to do too. I mean, we get hit with the same stuff. We're in the same market as everyone else. And I think it's just like you can't stop what you're doing because there's a little bit of unknowns here and there.
And there's something to be said about there can be a common ground between business owners. Why is it that like you can meet with another realtor and they're like, I feel slower. And I might be like, I feel slower, but why is their slow 15 deals a month and my slow's 8? And I'm like, woo, like, are we starting quarterback or backup quarterback? Maybe we should understand how the game's played, right? Now in sports, everyone knows that that's how the game played. Like some people are just they know they're a backup quarterback. Like that's their role in the NFL is like, I'm a backup quarterback. They get paid good. They're barely going to go in. Now, I'm not saying that's how we play this game, but I'm knowing like they're very self-aware of their role.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where like, I always like to look at other people's like, what if this was like an NFL league and we're all starting quarterbacks and we're fighting for a position. And so why when I sit down with some agents like, I'm so slow. And I'm like, I know I feel a little slower too. And they're like, how many do you have pending? I'm like, I don't know, like 6 or 7, and they're like, I have none. But then I can go talk to someone else like, I feel slow. How many do you have pending? I have 22. But they're busy was 42, so they feel slow, right? It's like it's common ground. The feeling is common, so we can respectfully say we feel the same. But our feeling the same and how much money we make can be totally different.
Well,
so that's what I get challenged with on a consistent basis is why when I talk to that agent and they're slow, it's 0 deals. Why when I talk to that agent and they're slow, it's 19 deals a month. And why with me, I'm in the middle, right? So it's like trying to figure out like, what am I just the backup quarterback in this game? Or what do I got to do? Do I got to go out and work at do I got to look at better video and figure out like, is the defense different? Like, why do I not see the defense the same way that quarterback sees the defense? Why is he throwing less interceptions than me? And that's when you realize like interest rates right now to me are a really good defense. And there's some people that are just better at offense. That's fine. Some people are starting quarterbacks. Some people are backup quarterbacks. Some people throw more interceptions. That's fair. And so, but I'm not talking to anybody like this. Please note, as I said all this stuff, I can sound super judgmental when I speak. This is legitimately my thoughts to this is my thoughts to myself. I just say them out loud. Like Brittany's known this for years. She's like, you are hard on yourself. And I'm like, welcome to this brain. I just learned to cope with it and reconcile my thoughts.
I don't think 2 things. Number one, I don't think you need so many disclaimers, Chris. Like, especially on Fired Up Friday, we are very direct. We're in a very like think next level kind of group. So next time you're here, you don't got a disclaimer. Number 2, the thing that I would say, and the thing that I've witnessed working with some of the highest producing agents in our country, is that you're correct in the amount of space between a decision, action, and that level of uncertainty. It is longer and shorter for different people. And what I've found is that the highest producers make that space as short as humanly possible. When they know, like something that I've found fascinating, especially in the last 3 months, is with the amount of uncertainty happening in our industry, I have not once seen any of my top producer friends talk about it. I have not seen Dustin Runyon talk about the National Association of Realtors. I have not seen Kevin Kaufman talk about the National Association of Realtors. I've not seen you guys talk about the National Association of Realtors, because that uncertainty does not serve us. And we have built careers in action. We know that whatever curveball comes our way, there will be a pivot, there will be a change, and it will require new and massive action, right? And so the people who are most productive, it is that they don't sit in the uncertainty for very long. They make a fucking decision. And so that's really where like finding your pieces is getting into action sooner. And like you said, some people throw more interceptions. Yeah, because they're faster. And so if you're sitting in this business and you're like, oh my gosh, my pendings are down, or like my business is down, or my whatever is down, like how much action are you taking? How much are you thinking? Right? So I think today was amazing, as promised. Y'all don't need disclaimers. I'm really grateful. Dustin, do you have something you want to add? You look like you did.
No, this was fire. I appreciate you both and I respect you both. I love how well thought out. It's crazy every time you see someone that is growing and or successful. I have this weird thing where I make them I make them special. I don't know what it is. It's just like it's like, and this is a good thing. Like I make them special till I get to know them and like until they share with what they do, and how on purpose they are about it, how meticulous they are about certain things, how well thought out certain things are, how disciplined they are about certain things, how prepared they are with things. And this is with Brittany and Chris. They're just that way. I mean, it's not a I'm not, after hearing the story, I'm not surprised they kick ass.
And
Like,
Dustin,
you know,
I
by
want
the
to say,
behavior they do.
I want to say something to you, man. Like the first time I heard you speak, probably like 2.5 years ago, I remember telling Brittany, I'm like, that dude, like, it's mindset, man. Like, this is not industry. This isn't tactics. This is mindset. I've always loved that about you, is you always are hitting straight up on the mindset. Like I actually think somebody who can win at a high level in real estate and know all the tactics could go into a plumbing business and succeed at a high level, a roofing business, a land development company, have the best nail salon. Like, because like they just have the winner's mindset. And so when I heard you speak for the first time, like, I love how we're not talking pendings and open houses, because like that doesn't translate to every industry. Mindset translates to every industry. Like if you want to be a winner and be in the winner's circle, then you want to go to masterminds where it's a bunch of business owners that are winners and not specific in the industry. Like you could speak at any of those and you do that like effortlessly. And so it's like so authentic on how you speak. It's just, and you leave away from everyone. I'm like, where does he like get these frameworks? Because I see you as frameworks. You have these frameworks where like not a lot of words have to be said. You've built like a framework about like how to think. And that's what I think more people think. It's like not think longer. It's, hey, here's how to process thinking, do it in this structure, and then move on. And thinking about it more actually is not beneficial. It won't have you grow. And you have these really great frameworks that I just, when you post them, if I see you speak, I'm like, that is gold. And you do that well. And I hope to see you one day, like with like a 10,000, 20,000 crowd, because you totally deserve it. You can actually pump someone up.
Well, don't you think, is there anything once you executed it and you were successful in it, was there anything that was ever overtly complex about the execution and or the success of it?
No, not really. Cause like even what I know, I think this is probably the hardest thing to reconcile, Dustin, is like where I know I have to go. Like where I know I have to go, I know in my head what I have to do. And just sometimes I have to sit there for like 7 days and just figure out. I'm like, I this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. And it's not that hard. It's just deciding like what day do you wake up and give it your obsession. That's really it. Like, this is where I want to go. I know what to do, but when's the day I'm going to be obsessed about it? And not, I've sat back certain days and I'm like, not today. I know what this is going to take. Like, this is the goal. This is what it's going to take. And I know what to do, but like, you've got to wake up with an obsession and I'm not ready yet. So like when we went on buying 16 homes in like a 2-year period while selling 132 homes that year, like that was a straight obsession, meaning like we woke up and it was like, I told Britt, like, goal, know what to do. And it's hard to bring that obsession to that mission. And so that's why I'm very loose on when I tell people to sign up for something. Like when my buddy's like, hey, do you want to do 75 hard? And I'm like, I don't want to make this decision willy-nilly, you know, like I want to make sure that when I come in tomorrow that I'd rather say no than say yes and not go, right? So it's like, do I really want to bring this obsession to that project? And I think that we don't talk about obsession enough. And I think we frown upon it for those people that are obsessed. But dude, I haven't met very many people that have cool things. very few people on stage talk about really cool things and then don't tell me this year or two period of like absolute obsession. I'm not saying at the expense of their spouse or their kids, but I am talking about at the expense of like watching sports on Sunday or Netflix at night, right? So it's just like, what's this other, these can be my six things I'm going to water every day, but I don't have time for the other 14 things to water. Like, I don't want to wake up and be known for the master complete series of Netflix, right? I want to be known for something else. So it's that obsession, Dustin. I think you talk about that a lot. And so, yeah, there's nothing really tactical, I think, that gets in our way. It's just, we know what to do. And when are we going to sign up to take that absolute obsession?
Yeah. I love that. I think obsession is a symptom of, it's a symptom of true decision. I think decision is a word that is used it's extraordinarily loosely. So like, I use this really stupid analogy of like, I have a light that I want to get to, a stoplight, right? And it's 3 miles away. And a decision is I'm already at the fucking light. I'm getting to the light. It's done. It's over. The light is happening. And what I believe is when we overthink it, though, I think overthinking and over planning, because when has a plan gone as planned? So never, right? So I know me, I tend to overthink. So I have this thing is like, I want to underthink it and follow principle. And so what I see is I've done in the past is I'd start walking towards that light, and this is a metaphor, and I would get gum on my shoe. And so I would stop and I'd like pick the gum up and I'd let it kind of stop me for a moment. And then I'd keep going. And then there would be this, a circle of cones with a hole, and I'd walk and I'd fall in the hole. I'd get up and I'd keep walking. And then there'd be this wall, and I'd have to jump over the wall, and I'd jump over the wall, and I keep walking. And then there would be this like tree in my way, and I'd have to walk around the tree and get hit by a branch and get cut on my face. And then I keep walking. I like to let action teach me these lessons. I'd like to let experience, and experiences is what you get when you don't get what you want. And the experienced people are the successful people. And experience only comes from pain, right? And so I'm getting to the light. And what a lot of people do is when they get the gum stuck on their shoe, they go, the light's not that pretty. And this gum's on my shoe. And then they get to the cones and they go, oh, there's a hole there. The light's not, you know what? Maybe they change their mind about the light. They never truly decide. They never decide. And the
Dustin,
cool thing is,
oh, sorry. Keep going. Oh, I was just going to say, like in real life, like that happens. Like you can probably say so many stories in real life. Like I think of times where like years ago, I'd spill coffee in my car and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I need to pull over and clean it. But like, I remember spilling my coffee in my car not that long ago, and I was obsessed on that day's mission. And I'm like, yeah, I don't care if the coffee's in my car or not. Like, I'm going to go make cash right now and I'll buy a new car, right? Like, I'm not saying this in a bragging way. I'm saying like, it's a framework of mentality of like, okay, so $62 mat, like cool, right? I left a listing appointment last week. My car was gone. My client's like, where's your car? And I'm like, did I Uber here? I don't even remember. And she's like, no. And I'm like, I don't have a car. And she's like, well, what are you going to do about it? I'm like, I got to get to a lunch, an important meeting. I'm Ubering. I called an Uber, and she's like, I've never seen somebody react like, do you care where your car is? I'm like, I don't care where my car is. We'll find it. I called my assistant in the Uber, went to my meeting. They found the car. And I'm like, but it shows you, and I'm not bragging anyway. I'm like, there's days where I'm not that way. There's days where it's like, you know what? I don't really want, like, I want to get to the light. And I kind of want to step on the gum because I'm like, I really just wanted an excuse that the world would allow. And when they're like, Chris, why didn't you reach your goals today? I'm like, I got gum on my shoe. And they're like, oh my gosh, I got gum on my shoe too, and I didn't do it. Or like, I was like, what am I going to say? Like, I didn't get to my very important lunch meeting because my car got stolen / I don't know. Like, that was like next mission. And people, like, when I got to lunch, they were like, you don't know where your car is. One, the story was the currency. I actually would have paid for the story. I make more money off that story than ever because it's just my way of life. And it's like, they think it's so weird. I'm like, that's just who I am. Right. But that's so I actually think that would have been the day where I would have been like, hey guys, I can't meet you guys because my car got stolen / don't know where it's at. I don't even know if I drove here. But I went to the meeting, and that was an important meeting. That was 3 people in my crew. And that was one of the best conversations I've had that week. And I wasn't willing to let the car getting stolen / I don't know where it's at. And when I got there, they're like, you don't know where your car is? And I'm like, no, and I need you to take me to my next appointment because you're my homie. So can you do that? And they're like, yeah. But that whole philosophy was like, they were like, well, why did you meet us here? And I'm like, very important people to me. No excuses. I knew what this conversation was going to be. We were going to change the world with this conversation. Can we allow that to happen here? Like, we don't have time for cars being stolen today. Let's go. Like, Ubers are around. And so like, that's, I think a lot of times we're looking to step in the gum. We're looking for our car to be taken. We're looking for, oh my gosh, like, what happened today? Like, who's sick out there? Who can I, like, who needs me? Like, who needs me more than my business? And we actually, it sounds good to the world. And we're like, oh, you know what? Like, I had to go do this. And most of your friends will be like, oh my gosh, that makes sense. I don't know. Go hang around other people in their masterminds and be like, wait, you didn't reach your goals. Why? And you're like, because my car got stolen / taken. I don't know. And they're like, I don't know. That doesn't, the groups that I'm hanging out with, they wouldn't allow that excuse. They'd be like, wow, like, I couldn't imagine watching my documentary one day when I'm gone. And they're like, oh, he didn't hit his, like, in the part where they're like, we can't continue this documentary. And they're like, well, what happened? Well, 39, his car got stolen. And that was it. Like, that was Chris's demise. Like, it's over. Like, Dustin stepped in the gum. Like, Dustin can't land develop anymore. Like, he stepped in gum. His boots got broken, right? So like, it's just not allowed. And I'm not saying like there's always perfect days. It's just, it's a thought process of like, are we looking for the world to give us acceptable excuses that people will relate to? Or are we looking to go do things where people look at us and like, I think sometimes people need someone that they look at and they say, man, he makes interesting decisions. And then maybe that'll allow them to change their life. Cause they're like, they just do that. Like, the coffee gets spilled and they go, or the car gets stolen, they just go. Or that person also had this, like, AC went out in their house today and they didn't post about it on Facebook and still went, right? Like, I think we're just actually looking for a lot of things in our life to be able to tell people we didn't reach it because this happened. And we live in a land where that's acceptable. Find friends that tell you that's not, and that you need to step up and be bigger. But those are my friends I want.
So good. See, you guys say this shit so much better than me. What the fuck?
No, the gum was good.
Everybody. I mean, this is really great. Good. No, that is so good. We have a bunch of people that work in our office, and it's funny. The productive people, they're not sick as much. Their car doesn't break down as much. Their computer rarely breaks down. And it's not like none of these things happen. You just don't hear about it because they keep going. And the unproductive people, they're sick all the time. Their kids are always sick. Their computer's always down. The printer never works. The fact, it's just like, and it's hilarious. But you guys are amazing. I really appreciate you guys being on, and I can't wait to get the recording of this and rewatch it. So thank you guys, and much respect to you. And if there's anything we can do for you guys ever, let us know.
Cool. Thanks for having us, man.
Thank you guys so much.
Thank you. Much love to you guys. See ya.